Thank you, Carl, and to anyone watching. Appreciate you taking the time to join us this evening. Much as we did for the high school project, and we had a live version of this on Saturday, and we'll have similar versions of this on February 1st and February 9th coming up. This is really the beginning of the project, the kickoff for us, because we spent the last year putting together a project team. And if I can introduce them and get right into the program so we're not all running late tonight. Most of the presentation you'll hear this evening will be done by Compass Project Management with Dom Taberi and Tim Bonfatti, who worked on the high school project, along with Carl Franceschi and Courtney Southwick of Drummy, Rosen, and Anderson Architects, who also worked on the high school project. Glad to have them on our team again. And again, welcome everyone here. Happy to answer any questions along the way. And at that, I would ask Dr. take over.
Thank you very much, TJ. Next slide, please. I'd like to spend first of all, welcome to everybody joining us this evening. I really appreciate everybody coming tonight. And we'll look forward to having a productive hour together. My role this evening is to give a 2-minute history lesson of the last 20 years and how we got here. And so just to bring everybody up to speed, back in 2003, 2009, we addressed ADA updates needed to bring all of our buildings into compliance. All of the buildings had some level of ADA issues at the time. And what was determined back then was that there was no feasible construction solution that could be found to remedy the multi-level obstacles that didn't approach the cost of a building replacement over at the South. So the South was grandfathered in based on the replacement of the building being prioritized down the road. In 2010, the Facilities Master Planning Committee prioritized the high school and the South as the next buildings that need improvement. And as everyone knows, the high school was the first building. We entered the msba in the 2014-2015 school year, and we opened our beautiful new high school in 2019. So that brings us to our current situation, where the Facilities Master Planning Committee took another look at the schools and looked at the school prioritization list and identified both the South and the Wilkins as the next schools needing attention. Next slide, please. So if you look at the scope of our 5 elementary schools, you'll see that the South and the Wilkins are the oldest schools of the 5 elementary schools, and they're the ones that we've identified as needing attention moving forward. If I could just see the next slide real quick. So what are we doing tonight? We are assembling the bill. We have the building committee, and we're in community participation. We're being transparent with the community, communicating the need, and we're seeking meaningful input. And the one thing that I wanted to mention is that we have also put priorities on the other elementary school buildings. And so occasionally somebody will ask, what about the Daw, the Gibbons, the Hanson, and what are we doing to those buildings to keep them up to snuff? And so we already have articles moving forward for dual entry vestibules at the Daw and the Gibbons to bring them up to security codes and current ADA codes. We're working with a camera replacement and upgrades at all of our elementary schools. We're working on a playground replacement plan over at the Hanson, working with the CPC. And we have articles moving forward for door hardware and security improvements in all of our schools. Later, you're going to hear about how we are going into the feasibility study now for this project. The feasibility study is asking us to evaluate several options. One option is a renovation or replacement of the South building with a design enrollment of 225 students, or a redistricting plan to move from 5 elementary schools to 4 for a design enrollment of 515 students. And it's important to remember that those are design enrollments and not design capacities. So later you're going to see those numbers again. And it's important to remember those are design enrollments. The capacities could certainly be higher. And the MSBA understands that, but they do have to give us a baseline number in order to construct the building. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to the project team to continue with the presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Rabb. This is Carl Franceschi. I'm principal with DRA Architects. I'm happy to be back in Stoughton working on this project. And this first phase of feasibility study that was referred to has a few different components, one of which is to examine the existing condition of the South Elementary School. And our firm actually did this 10 years ago. So I think people who are familiar with the South know that there are some significant needs there in all aspects of the building. Certainly the code, the ADA code issues are pretty visible with the multi levels of the building, but also the infrastructure, the mechanical, electrical systems are well past their useful life. Actually, the district's doing the best they can to maintain it, but the exterior envelope, single pane glass and so forth is significantly deficient compared to today's modern code compliant constructions, and the site itself has some deficiencies as well. Those who are part of the pickup and drop off there know how tight it is, and it does not really flow as well as it could. But we also look at sort of educational spaces too, and how they perform and so forth. So we put together a quick series of slides here that I'll just take you through. That on the left-hand side are photos of the existing South, and on the right-hand side are some more modern, up-to-date comparable spaces like a cafetorium, which is a multi-purpose space. It's not just for dining. It obviously is for presentation as well, and those spaces can be improved at South. The hallways nowadays, to be not just efficient, but to accommodate different learning styles and different curricula and so forth, we try to use every bit of space, with the saying, learning happens everywhere. And so we do look for little nooks and crannies and collaborative areas off of the hallways. It's not just a straight shot lined with lockers or with storage of coats and books, and the classrooms themselves too. While there are large windows at the South, as we said, they're not very energy efficient, and then the lighting and the finishes and the technology and equipment all could be upgraded to be more robust, rich, up-to-date environment. And as we mentioned, these nooks and crannies are not just sort of nice to look at, but they're actually functional in terms of accommodating different learning styles and different activities that go on in classrooms these days. The gymnasium too at South is particularly small compared to what an elementary school could be these days, not just to serve the school itself, but to serve the community after hours. It can do double duty. The state will support, a full-size basketball court, for instance, in a school like this. And the library too at South, it's moved a few times in its existence there. It occupies a space now that is probably about 1/3 or 1/4 the size it should be, even for the enrollment, the current enrollment there. And libraries too, as many of you know, are no longer just repositories for books where everyone goes and are quiet. There are maker spaces associated with them. There's group activities. There's access to computers and resources and TV studios, and a lot of technology happens in really media centers, or sometimes known as learning commons. And then outdoor too, we try to extend the learning spaces to the outdoors, and not just for play, but for learning. And the South site has some nice wooded areas right nearby that could support such activities. So that's another thing that we look at in whatever option we end up developing in the future. Here's an example of not just having a fire lane around the building that's paved, but having some outdoor gathering spaces that can be an outdoor classroom. So I'll turn it over to Dom Taveri with Compass Vertex to talk more specifically about the Massachusetts School Building Authority process. Dom?
Thank you, Carl. Thank you, everybody, for taking time this evening. I'll try to go through this a little bit, just so that everybody understands the steps we go through and how we get to where we're getting to. And there are 3 steps in the MSBA process that we partner with as the Stoughton School District. We are presently in the preliminary design program. That's the farthest left of the slide. As you heard from Carl, we are in the midst of the initial space summary, gathering that information, evaluating the existing conditions. You can see some of those photographs there. Site development requirements are being worked on by their consultants right now. The education program is being composed right now by the district going forward with our principals inputting 21st century learning values. The one thing that was brought up by Dr. Rabb was the evaluation scenarios. As you can see, we're required by the MSBA to review all those submissions and put them together. This is not, these are just options. We will present this to the school committee prior to the submission to the MSBA. The next, just so you understand, our next steps will be the preferred schematics, continuing the evaluation of the existing conditions and starting to distill the options until we get a preferred solution. That will also depend on the final decision regarding enrollment. Following that, once we get the approvals, we will go into schematic design. The schematic design gets more refined. There'll be drawings, 30% drawings. And you'll see that we'll have our consultants involved in traffic, environmental, geotech, sustainability, ADA, et cetera. That submission will be sometime January of 2024. If we go to the next slide, Carl, just a bar chart kind of giving us, our milestones. But as I said, we submit our preliminary design program sometime, we have it as April 4th, 2023. Then we get into schematic report, the preferred schematic that will be submitted in June of 23. Further, we go through schematic design where we'll get to the point where we'll be presenting this for a town meeting ballot vote. If approved at that time, we will go into a year of design, which will put our bid documents out onto the street sometime June of 2024. And occupancy for construction would be September of 2027.
Another part of the feasibility study that Don mentioned, we're looking at, multiple options, not just in terms of the enrollment options, but a few different site options. We cast a pretty big net at first as kind of required to look at the entire town and town-owned parcels, but after fairly quick evaluation, only a few actually rose to the top to actually to merit further investigation. Partially because we are looking for sites, in the current South School, catchment area geographically, so that the town will still have a good distribution of elementary schools. So the 3 that we'll look at a little bit further here are labeled. Number 13 is the existing South School itself, the existing building on Ash Street. The 14 is the athletic field space behind the existing school. And then number 1 there is a piece of town-owned land that the town acquired back in the 60s, again, for school purposes, with some frontage on Park Street that also fronts on what's known as a paper street, a street that was laid out but never really developed or accepted as a public way, called Fano Drive. So those are the 3 parcels that we're going to look at a little bit further in testing out these options. And again, the options will include both new construction on these other parcels and a renovation addition of the existing South School to the extent that that's feasible. And we'll be doing those options, those building options, for 2 different enrollments, as Dom mentioned, for the 225 and the 515 design enrollments. So we'll use kind of this process here to try to be as kind of objective as possible in going through this process and as comprehensive as possible. So you can see the two different design enrollments there, the decision, downstream that will be ultimately made by the building committee and the school committee is, will this be a redistricting situation of combining the two schools ultimately into a larger enrollment of 515, or maintaining the smaller enrollment of 225? Will it be new construction? Will it be an existing, building renovation and addition? And which of those three parcels that have been narrowed down will be the ultimate site? Is kind of the sequence of decisions that will be made in the next few months here. As Don pointed out, we hope to get to the preferred option, which is not just the enrollment, but the building configuration and sort of conceptual design by June of this coming spring. And as the other part of the feasibility study that's already underway as well is the educational planning of it, and that really involves a sort of visioning process that's being led by our educational consultant, David Stephen. And we've already conducted 2 visioning workshops with a group. You can see the sort of makeup of that group of some 35 people, with leadership, with teachers, with parents, students, community partners, all being part of helping develop the vision for the new elementary school, not just for this one, but actually for all of Stoughton's elementary schools. The idea is that this vision and sort of the educational goals that come out of it would be applicable to all schools. So there is a 3rd workshop coming up, and after that, as we mentioned, this gets sort of focused into an educational plan that gets submitted to the state for their review, and we will use that as kind of a roadmap going forward. So before we design anything, we want to make sure that Stoughton has thought about the way teaching and learning wants to happen in this project, kind of independent of whether it's a renovation addition or independent of which site it goes on. There are still some principles that we want to adhere to. So that's basically the major components of the workshop. Let me see if this is stuck. There we go. So the things that have come out of it to date, just to give you a quick little sampling. There's that word cloud that showed some of the most common words. The larger the word, the more people in the group endorsed it. So you can see collaborative, inclusive, engaging. Those are some of the characteristics that people want to see in the curriculum and in the building itself. And some of the issues that are being dealt with as part of the visioning process, and being recorded in a number of different ways. That photograph there is of David Stephen meeting with the teachers the other day at the South Cafetorium. And then just to remind you all, thank you again for being here tonight. We're very pleased with the interest and the participation, and we want to let you know it's going to continue. And there are a number of ways that you can stay in touch with this information. That QR code in the center will bring you to the project website, project page rather, on the school's website. And you'll see that there are a few other upcoming community forums already scheduled, and there'll be more in addition. But next week, February 1 and then February 9th, there'll be, we're trying to be sort of comprehensive in how these are presented. So we will, we've developed a pattern of doing them in person and then also doing them like tonight virtually too, so that we can sort of satisfy those people that can't make it in person or prefer to do it virtually, in both sort of formats. And then also we'll let you know that there will be kind of an ongoing Facebook page, but also ongoing newsletters that will be distributed in a variety of ways, including, through your school principals and their newsletters and their updates as well. So our team will be putting together at least a monthly kind of newsletter that summarizes the activities to date and what's upcoming and so forth. So with that, the other part of this evening that's especially valuable to us is we want to get your feedback and your input. And so through the magic of Zoom here, we can put people into breakout rooms to be in smaller groups so that we can take our 50 or 60 participants here and allow your feedback and we've sort of prompted you with these 4 general categories. What are your hopes and dreams, and what are you most excited about in this process? How would you define a successful project, and what are your concerns or questions about the process? And I want to point out that we will collect all of these questions. The easiest way to get your feedback is if you click on that Google that QR code, it will take you to a Google form that is a live and living document that will be maintained to collect all the feedback, and particularly, obviously, questions. We won't have time or be able to get into them tonight, but we will be collecting them all and responding to them in the future with an ongoing Q&A that's maintained on the project website, and we'll share a lot of the feedback at future forums as well. So,
Carl, I put the link to the Google form in the chat, so everybody should have access to that.
yeah,
if for
if
some
you
reason
click on the
QR
chat
code.
as well, right? There's that form too.
Yeah.
So without further ado, we will have Jeff assign people to various breakout rooms. I think we'll have probably at least 6 or 7 different rooms. Don't worry about which room you're in. It's all just sort of random, and you'll be asked to join, be prompted. And that's the forum that we can have a little bit more personal or interpersonal discussion among folks. But you can also, as we've said, put down your thoughts on that Google form as well, so that they don't get lost. We'll spend about, about 20 to 25 minutes in this process. And then at the end, we will close all the rooms and have people just briefly come back together, and we'll try and have a quick summary. I know there'll be a lot to summarize, but we'll hit just a few of the high points and announcements just to wrap up at the end of the evening, and try to keep to our time period today. So if you have that prompt in front of you, just click join and you'll be assigned to one of the breakout rooms. Okay, thank you very much. Welcome back, everyone. I think most everyone's coming back here. All the rooms closed now, Jeff? Is that right?
Yes.
Yes, okay. How many rooms did we have?
We had a total of 6 rooms.
6 rooms. I don't want to take too much time, but it is good, I think, if someone from each group could just quickly give us sort of the tenor of discussion. Obviously, we try and we'll be capturing a lot of this in both in our recording and our Google form too, but just for the people who were in other rooms and want to understand what was going on elsewhere with their neighbors. I'll start and talk about room number 1 there. There's a fair amount of discussion about redistricting and how that's going to work, and why was the Wilkins selected as the other school to be consolidated with South, and some good thoughts about thinking about the area of the South School itself and the potential sites there, safety and transportation and development of those properties. There's some issues to be considered as we move through the design process. It was all very good discussion in that regard. And there was some expression of preference for smaller schools, and both, for the neighborhood feel and for the educational benefit of them that should be considered here. So I think that's what I would offer. Is there someone from room number 2 that would like to spend just a minute, hit the highlights of your group?
I don't mind starting, and if anyone else wants to join in, you're welcome to. We talked a little bit about energy efficiency for the new building and the concern about, what codes are coming about soon in terms of being net zero ready, if not net zero for the project. And that's certainly discussions that we'll be having very soon. There's also concerns about discussions, financial discussions, and wanting to know if we've had financial discussions with the town's advisor yet, as well as concerns about the existing South School. What is going to happen with the existing South School, if the new project comes online and we're not doing an addition, renovation project. Also, a lot of concern about just getting the message out and making sure that, everybody knows about these forums. So we should be looking at different outlets such as, different moms groups and different Facebook groups associated with the district, as well as someone mentioned the suburban shopper, as well as other options. And then, let's see, I think I hit on most of it. And then in terms of site selection, making, have we narrowed down the site? And we talked a little bit about the 3 sites that Carl showed earlier, and those being the front runners in terms of moving forward.
Okay, thanks, Courtney. Anyone in room number 3 want to share some of your thoughts and discussion?
Yeah, I mean, I'll do the same as Courtney. I can definitely start, and then if anyone else from the group wants to share that, feel free to cut me off. I think our group was working pretty diligently on filling out the Google form. So I am really looking forward to seeing what came out of the Google form. There were some questions that were asked generally. I think it seems like a trend so far about, what happens to the other buildings once a new building is created. Is there a plan for that? Have we considered any other scenarios or different options around usages of the other buildings and adding on to other buildings versus doing something new? Will there be additional functions like pre-K or other school facilities involved in the new building projects? And then I think what started to come up at the end a little bit was what happens if there was financial questions, then the question started to come up about like what happens if it is challenging to move forward with a project financially for the town. That was starting to come up at the end. And I think the big thing was the questions that are collected in this group. When will that information be coming out, and how are we going to share that information? And I think there's just a lot of interest in generally being as up to date as possible when we have the answers that we do, and an understanding that we don't have all of those things right now.
Great. Thanks, Jake.
Yeah.
Let's see, we're up to room 4, is it? Someone?
Yeah, I think we were in room 4. So we had a lot of very similar themes in our chat room, as it seems the others did. There was some overall concern or questions around the feeling that a lot of attention is being given to the idea that we're going to be building a larger or quote super school, and some concern that we're not being as mindful and thoughtful about thinking about just renovations or building a smaller school. That seems to be similar in some of the other rooms as well. We did have some questions about early childhood and preschool, and if there was any consideration in including them in the plan, given that their population potentially is growing as well. Questions about how much we've looked at information from other towns and districts that have gone through this, and kind of looking at some of the different things that they've had to contend with so that we could potentially avoid some of those issues here. Questions about the locations that had been chosen and consideration with them being in one part of the town. And then what kind of impact that would be overall to the students that were going to have to be redistricted. And again, there were just some hopes and dreams for community fields, a playground that's age appropriate for different ages, a substantially separate auditorium so that the community would be able to use it and things like that. So.
Great. All right. Thanks, Katie. What are we up to? Room 5? Someone report out?
I think that's me. Really, my group just really, we focused on the distribution of students. We know that study is ongoing, and we'll be talking about that. And we did review a bit on the options, the site options. But in general, I think the people in my group were busily working on the Google Docs too. So that's all I have, Carl.
Okay. Thanks, Tom. Room 6. Anyone?
Well, I think group 6 was the one Courtney started with, but I could be mistaken.
We actually had a group, there was no group 6, it was group 7. So
Oh,
the
okay.
final group, that was a mistake on my end.
So I'm group 7.
Thanks,
And
Joyce.
we had a lot of recognition of that the South School definitely needs to be replaced after people see it and those who've lived it. But some questions and some concerns about the loss of the Wilkins neighborhood and the community, and then, well, the neighborhood school and losing the Wilkins, and understanding how we'll be saving cost actually if we intend to still repurpose the Wilkins. There were questions on redistricting and when we would know more about that, and kind of how that played also into Title I decisions and identification of building. There was questions about why wasn't the preschool considered with the South building instead of the Wilkins. Again, not liking the loss of the neighborhood school. And where was the middle school in all of this? And you know, kind of pointing out that at this point, this was an elementary school going forward. So we're only talking elementary, but understanding that the middle school is a high priority as well. The next one on the list. And then some ideas on, you know, liking what they saw in the examples with the brightness, with the amount of windows, with the light, with the smart technologies, and looking forward to some opportunities for some outdoor plays or learning spaces, and, you know, hoping to make sure that the Wi-Fi extended covers the outdoor area that will be used. And a lot of the same things that were mentioned through all the other sessions.
Okay. Well, thanks, Joyce. That's great. Let me just share here again, just to remind people, and again, I think it's in the chat as well, but we're you know, pleased with the turnout tonight. I think at some point we were up to 60 or so participants, which is wonderful, and there's still these various sources of ongoing information. Please share them with your neighbors and your friends, and let them know there's obviously a lot still to come. And the more immediate upcoming forums, as we mentioned, next week at the Wilkins School itself, and then the following week another virtual one. And when we pair these together, by the way, it's not necessary to attend both of them. Generally, we repeat the same information in the presentation part of it. You're certainly welcome to attend both, but there will be some new information, some ongoing, you know, status of the project at each round of these community forums that we do, and there'll be more following those two as shown here. So I guess I'll offer to Dr. Rabb if there's any final thoughts you want to share.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming this evening, and I really appreciate everybody coming out. We will be putting together a comprehensive Q&A based on all the questions that we collected both last Saturday as well as this evening. So look forward to that.
Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay, have a good night.